In January 2025, former President Donald Trump addressed approximately 2,500 global leaders at the World Economic Forum WEF in Davos, Switzerland, shortly after being inaugurated for a second term as the 47th President of the United States. His virtual speech delivered on January 23 focused on economic growth, trade policies, and deregulation, which he claimed would make the U.S. the best place for business. Key points from Trump's address. 1. Economic optimism. Trump emphasized that America is back and open for business, promoting his administration's efforts to reduce regulations and taxes. He claimed to be initiating the largest deregulation campaign in history and proposed lowering the corporate tax rate from 21% to 15%. He asserted that under his presidency there would be no better place on earth for creating jobs, building factories, or growing a company than in the United States. 2. Deregulation and energy policy, highlighting his administration's commitment to deregulating energy production. Trump declared a national energy emergency to expedite approvals for energy projects. He stated that the U.S. possesses the largest oil and gas reserves globally and would leverage these resources for economic growth. 3. Tariff policies. Trump warned that foreign companies wishing to sell in the U.S. would face tariffs unless they manufactured domestically. He expressed a determination to rectify trade imbalances by demanding respect from other nations, suggesting that the U.S. would pursue aggressive trade policies. 4. Concerns from global leaders. His remarks elicited mixed reactions from global leaders. Some, like WTO Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, expressed concern about the potential for a trade war reminiscent of the Great Depression. In contrast, EU officials indicated a willingness to engage constructively with Trump's administration. 5. Social policies. Trump addressed ideological issues, dismissing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives as nonsense and reaffirming a rigid binary view of gender, which he stated would be reflected in U.S. policy. Timeline of events leading to Davos 2025. January 20, 2025, Trump was inaugurated for a second term. January 23, 2025, Trump delivered his address at the WEF, responding to questions from prominent CEOs including Steven Schwarzman of BlackRock and Ana Botín of Banco Santander. Common themes across sources. All sources emphasized Trump's focus on economic growth, deregulation, and a pro-business agenda. His energy policies and intention to leverage U.S. natural resources were consistently highlighted. The mixed reactions from global leaders, particularly regarding the implications of his tariffs, were noted across articles. Differences between sources. Source 1: WEF provided a detailed account of Trump's interaction with CEOs, focusing on economic optimism and growth metrics. Source 2: WEF offered a comprehensive transcript of Trump's speech, including his views on social policies and governance. Source 3: AP News highlighted international reactions to Trump's address, particularly concerns about trade wars, and included commentary from other leaders at the forum. Conclusion. In summary, Trump's address at Davos 2025 set a tone of aggressive economic nationalism, emphasizing deregulation, energy independence, and tariffs on foreign goods, while eliciting a spectrum of responses from global leaders concerned about the ramifications of his policies on international trade and cooperation. The event marked a significant moment in Trump's second term, showcasing his administration's commitment to a pro-business agenda and raising important questions about global economic relationships moving forward. The address given by former President Donald Trump at the 2025 World Economic Forum WEF in Davos presents several counterintuitive points that reflect a divergence from conventional economic wisdom and prevailing global attitudes toward issues such as trade regulation and social policy. Here are the key counterintuitive aspects identified in the content. 1. Deregulation as a path to economic growth. Trump claims that his administration is initiating the largest deregulation campaign in history, which he argues will make the U.S. the best place for business. This assertion is counterintuitive because many economists believe that regulations are essential for protecting public interests, ensuring environmental sustainability, and preventing market failures. Trump's emphasis on deregulation, particularly in energy production and environmental protections, contradicts the growing global consensus on the need for regulatory frameworks to address climate change and promote sustainable practices. 2. Tariffs as a means to trade balance. Trump warns that foreign companies wishing to sell in the U.S. would face tariffs unless they manufacture domestically. This stance is counter to the general economic theory that free trade is typically beneficial for all parties involved and that tariffs can lead to trade wars, ultimately harming consumers and businesses alike. The historical reference to the Great Depression highlights the potential for tariffs to provoke retaliatory measures from trading partners, which can escalate into broader economic conflicts. 3. Dismissal of diversity and inclusion initiatives. Trump refers to diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives as nonsense, advocating for a return to a binary view of gender and traditional meritocracy. This position is counterintuitive in a world increasingly recognizing the importance of diversity in driving innovation and reflecting societal values. Many studies indicate that diverse teams often outperform homogeneous ones, and Trump's dismissal of DEI contradicts this growing body of evidence. 4. Optimism amidst economic chaos. Trump portrays a narrative of economic optimism, claiming a surge in business confidence and investment following his election. This claim is counterintuitive given the backdrop of high inflation and economic challenges that the U.S. faces. The assertion that small business optimism has skyrocketed while inflation remains a significant issue challenges the standard economic understanding that high inflation can dampen consumer and business confidence. 5. Energy independence through fossil fuels. Trump's assertion that the U.S. can achieve energy independence primarily through fossil fuels, particularly coal, is counterintuitive amid global trends towards renewable energy sources. Many countries are investing heavily in renewable energy to combat climate change, and the reliance on fossil fuels is increasingly viewed as unsustainable. Trump's declaration of a national energy emergency to expedite fossil fuel projects contrasts sharply with global energy policies advocating for a transition to cleaner energy. 6. Nationalism versus global cooperation. Trump's address embodies a strong nationalist sentiment promoting American interests above global cooperation. This position is counter to the prevailing view among many global leaders who advocate for collaboration to address transnational issues such as climate change, public health, and economic stability. The idea that the U.S. can dictate terms through tariffs and unilateral policies overlooks the interconnectedness of the global economy. 7. Characterization of political context. Trump describes his election as a massive mandate and a revolution of common sense, which stands in contrast to the perceptions of many political analysts who view his presidency as polarizing. This framing suggests a disconnect from a significant portion of the electorate that may not share his views, emphasizing a counter-narrative to the political landscape that includes substantial opposition to his policies. 8. Perception of international relations. Trump expresses optimism about maintaining good relations with China while simultaneously threatening tariffs. This duality is counterintuitive as it suggests a potential for cooperation while adopting an aggressive stance that could provoke conflict. The expectation that respect can be demanded through tariffs runs counter to diplomatic norms that typically rely on negotiation and mutual understanding. These counterintuitive elements reflect a broader tension between Trump's policies and the prevailing trends in global economics and social governance. His address at the WEF illustrates a commitment to a nationalist, deregulation-heavy agenda that may not align with the collective efforts of other nations to address shared challenges through cooperation and sustainable practices. In Donald Trump's address to the World Economic Forum (WEF) in January 2025, several key points emerged that warrant deeper analysis, particularly those aspects that may be overlooked by the general audience but hold significant implications for global economics, politics, and social policies. Overlooked aspects of Trump's address. 1. Deregulation campaign. Trump's proclamation of initiating the largest deregulation campaign in history is a theme that resonates with his previous administration's approach but is often dismissed without consideration of its potential ramifications. The significance here lies not just in the rhetoric but in the tangible effects of deregulation on environmental standards, public health, and labor rights. Critics have pointed out that deregulation often leads to short-term economic gains at the expense of long-term sustainability. The emphasis on deregulation could herald a shift in global standards, particularly affecting multinational corporations that operate under stricter regulations in other markets. 2. Tariff policies and trade imbalance. Trump's assertion that foreign companies wanting to sell in the U.S. must manufacture domestically and face tariffs if they do not is a pivot towards aggressive economic nationalism. While this approach is designed to rectify trade imbalances, it raises concerns among economists about the potential for trade wars reminiscent of the Great Depression. The historical context is critical. Protectionist policies in the 1930s exacerbated economic downturns and led to retaliatory measures from other nations. This historical parallel suggests that Trump's policies could have dire consequences for global trade, potentially stifling economic recovery efforts in a post-pandemic world. 3. Energy policy and national energy emergency. Trump's declaration of a national energy emergency to expedite energy project approvals highlights a significant shift towards prioritizing fossil fuels over renewable energy sources. This stance contradicts the growing global consensus around climate change and the need for sustainable energy practices. The implications are profound. Not only does this policy risk exacerbating environmental degradation, but it also positions the U.S. in opposition to international efforts aimed at reducing carbon emissions. Additionally, the prioritization of coal and fossil fuels could hinder investments in renewable technologies, which are increasingly seen as essential for long-term energy security and climate resilience. 4. Social policies and ideological framing. Trump's dismissal of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives as nonsense, combined with his assertion of a binary view of gender, reflects a broader ideological conflict that transcends economics. This aspect of his speech is significant because it signals a potential cultural and political shift within the U.S. and perhaps influences other nations with similar political climates. The implications of such positions could lead to heightened social divisions as they foster an environment where marginalized groups may face increased discrimination and reduced access to opportunities. 5. International relations and global cooperation. The mixed reactions from global leaders, particularly the concerns expressed by figures like WTO Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala about the risk of trade wars, underscore the fragility of international relations in the face of Trump's policies. His insistence that the U.S. will demand respect from other nations and impose tariffs could alienate allies and jeopardize long-standing cooperative agreements. This dynamic is particularly concerning given the interconnectedness of global economies and the potential for policy decisions in one nation to have far-reaching consequences worldwide. Significance of these overlooked points. The significance of these themes lies in their potential to reshape not only U.S. domestic policy but also the landscape of international relations and global economics. Economic impact. The push for deregulation and tariffs could lead to short-term economic boosts in the U.S., but it risks long-term economic isolation and a decline in global competitiveness. As countries respond to U.S. policies with their protectionist measures, a cycle of retaliation could ensue, stifling global trade and cooperation. Environmental consequences. The focus on fossil fuels and deregulation of energy practices poses a significant threat to global climate initiatives. The long-term environmental impacts could lead to increased natural disasters, public health crises, and economic instability affecting not just the U.S. but the entire planet. Social dynamics. The ideological positions taken by Trump may galvanize polarization within the U.S. and beyond. As nations grapple with issues of identity, inclusion, and equity, Trump's rhetoric could embolden similar movements elsewhere, potentially leading to increased social strife and unrest. Geopolitical repercussions.
The approach to international relations suggested in Trump's address could lead to a reconfiguration of alliances.
Countries that may feel threatened or disrespected by U.S. tariffs and demands might seek closer ties with adversarial nations, potentially destabilizing existing alliances and altering global power dynamics.
In essence,
while Trump's address at Davos 2025 may be viewed through the lens of traditional economic and political discourse, the underlying currents of his policies possess the potential to catalyze significant shifts in global norms affecting everything from international trade to social equity and environmental sustainability. These themes demand scrutiny not only for their immediate implications but also for their capacity to influence future generations and the global order. 1. Economic optimism and deregulation initiatives. Trump's address highlighted a strong emphasis on economic growth, proclaiming that America is back and open for business. His administration's proposed deregulation campaign aims to reduce corporate tax rates and eliminate restrictions on energy production with the goal of making the U.S. the best environment for business. This aggressive approach signals a pivot towards economic nationalism, prioritizing domestic manufacturing and job creation over global trade agreements. 2. Trade policies and tariff strategies. Trump's assertion that foreign companies wishing to sell in the U.S. would face tariffs unless they manufacture domestically reflects a protectionist stance. He aims to rectify trade imbalances while demanding respect from other nations. This strategy could lead to potential trade wars, with concerns raised by global leaders about the implications for international relations and economic stability. The mixed reactions from leaders, particularly regarding tariff threats, underscore the tension between U.S. economic policies and global trade dynamics. 3. Energy policy and national energy emergency declaration. Trump's focus on energy independence was a key aspect of his address, as he declared a national energy emergency to expedite energy project approvals and emphasized the U.S.'s vast oil and gas reserves. This approach not only aims to reduce energy costs but also positions the U.S. as a leader in energy production. However, it raises questions about environmental sustainability and the long-term viability of such policies in the context of global climate change initiatives. 4. Social policy stance and ideological rhetoric. Trump's dismissal of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives as nonsense and his rigid stance on gender identity reflect a broader ideological battle within U.S. politics. His rhetoric reinforces a binary view of gender and promotes a merit-based system, signaling a pushback against progressive social policies. This aspect of his address resonates with his base but raises concerns about inclusivity and equality in governance and societal structures. The potential societal implications of such policies warrant careful analysis, especially in a global context that increasingly values diversity and inclusion. 1. The 1933 Economic Conference in London. This conference was held during the Great Depression as countries sought to address the global economic crisis. The U.S. under President Franklin D. Roosevelt faced pressure to abandon the gold standard and adopt more flexible monetary policies. The conference ultimately highlighted the tensions between protectionist policies and international cooperation, echoing concerns raised during Trump's address at Davos regarding tariffs and trade relations. 2. The 2008 G20 summit in Washington, D.C., in response to the global financial crisis. Leaders from the G20 nations convened to discuss coordinated efforts to stabilize the world economy. The summit focused on financial regulation, trade imbalances, and economic recovery strategies. Similar to Trump's emphasis on economic nationalism and deregulation, the summit faced challenges as countries debated the balance between protectionist measures and global economic cooperation. 3. The 2016 U.S. presidential election. Donald Trump's campaign centered on America First rhetoric, which emphasized protectionism, tariffs, and a departure from globalism. His victory marked a significant shift in U.S. foreign policy, paralleling the themes of economic nationalism he reiterated during his 2025 Davos address. The election results prompted global leaders to reassess their strategies in dealing with the U.S. and its approach to international trade and cooperation. Future outlook. Predictions following Trump's address at Davos 2025. Former President Donald Trump's address to global leaders at the World Economic Forum WEF in Davos, Switzerland. In January 2025 marked a significant moment in international economic and political discourse. With a focus on economic nationalism, deregulation, and trade protectionism, Trump's speech provided a preview of potential future trends that could reshape the global landscape. Here are several predictions for the future based on the themes highlighted during the address. 1. Economic growth and deregulation. Trump's commitment to the largest deregulation campaign in history is likely to lead to a resurgence in U.S. economic activity in the short term. By reducing corporate tax rates and easing regulations, the administration may spur job creation and investment, particularly in manufacturing and energy sectors. However, this growth may come at the expense of environmental protections and labor rights. As businesses flock to the U.S. for favorable conditions, there could be an uptick in domestic production, resulting in a temporary boost in economic confidence. 2. Increased trade tensions. Trump's warning of tariffs against foreign companies could reignite trade tensions reminiscent of previous economic conflicts. If implemented, these tariffs may lead to retaliatory measures from other nations, potentially sparking a trade war. Economists predict that such conflicts could escalate, resulting in increased prices for consumers and disruptions in global supply chains. Countries may respond by seeking alternative markets or forming new trade alliances that circumvent U.S. tariffs. 3. Energy policy shifts. Trump's emphasis on energy independence and the use of U.S. natural resources signals a potential shift in global energy dynamics. The declaration of a national energy emergency and a push for greater fossil fuel production may lead to a resurgence in oil and gas markets. In the long term, however, this could hinder the transition to renewable energy sources, as investments and policy focus may divert away from sustainable practices. The global community may respond with increased pressure to adopt greener policies, leading to a clash between national interests and international climate commitments. 4. Polarization of social policies. Trump's dismissal of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, along with his promotion of a binary view of gender, is indicative of a broader cultural polarization that may intensify in the coming years. This could manifest in legislative battles over social policies in the U.S. and abroad as countries grapple with issues of identity and equality. The pushback against wokeism could galvanize conservative movements, while liberal factions may mobilize in defense of progressive values, resulting in heightened political tensions domestically and internationally. 5. Geopolitical realignments. The combination of Trump's isolationist tendencies and aggressive economic policies may lead to a re-evaluation of alliances and partnerships. As nations react to U.S. tariffs and trade demands, we could see a reconfiguration of global alliances, with countries like China, the European Union, and Russia seeking to strengthen their ties in opposition to U.S. hegemony. This could lead to a multipolar world where economic and political power is distributed among several dominant nations rather than concentrated in the U.S. 6. Impact on the global economy. Trump's policies may initially boost the U.S. economy, but the long-term effects on the global economy could be detrimental. A potential trade war and increased protectionism could stifle international trade, leading to economic stagnation in various regions. The World Trade Organization's concerns about protectionist measures echo historical precedents where similar policies contributed to global economic downturns. A fragmented economy may hinder collaborative responses to global challenges such as climate change and public health crises. 7. Technological advancements and AI. Trump's focus on positioning the U.S. as a leader in artificial intelligence and technology may accelerate investments in these sectors. Companies may respond to favorable policies by ramping up research and development, leading to significant technological advancements. However, this could also raise ethical concerns regarding the implications of AI on labor markets, privacy, and social equity. The US may find itself at the forefront of technological innovation, but with that progress comes the responsibility to address the societal impacts of such advancements. 8. Potential for domestic unrest. As Trump's policies take hold, there may be a rise in domestic unrest, particularly among groups feeling marginalized by economic and social changes. The polarization created by divergent views on identity politics and economic policies may lead to protests and civil discontent. This unrest could challenge the stability of Trump's administration and necessitate a reconsideration of governance strategies to address the concerns of various demographic groups.
Conclusion.
Trump's address at Davos 2025 set the stage for a future characterized by aggressive economic nationalism, trade tensions, and social polarization. While the immediate effects may manifest as economic growth and increased investments in the U.S., the long-term consequences could include significant geopolitical shifts and challenges to global cooperation. As nations respond to these developments, the global landscape will likely undergo profound changes, requiring new strategies for engagement and collaboration in an increasingly interconnected world.